This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com. We continue our road trip, going to different locations and talking about the Iowa caucuses that are coming up very soon. Today what I want to do is talk about the amazing rise of Newt Gingrich to the top of the field. The latest poll that I saw this morning is that he has a 37% approval rating. 37% of likely caucus goers in Iowa say that they are going to support him in the caucuses. And also, he now is the candidate seen as the most likely to beat Barack Obama in the presidential contest, and that's the first time that any Republican has actually risen to that level. So this is an extraordinary story of a guy who essentially got into the race, expended quite a lot of money, had a lot of controversies in the beginning when he, Newt Gingrich, basically launched his campaign and then took a 3-week vacation with his wife on a cruise in Greece. He began to spend a lot of money on private charter jets, flying around the country, and his campaign team became very frustrated because they thought that he was not really investing time and energy in the things that he needed to do to win the Iowa caucuses or to run a credible campaign. And so a lot of his campaign team in Iowa and New Hampshire quit, and he went very deep in debt. We had all written him off, and essentially, as he says, he was left for dead. And then with some very careful reorganization of the campaign, refocusing, suddenly he began to rise in the polls. He did very well in the presidential debates around the country. Those were like magic for him because he managed to be the guy that had essentially a more mature attitude. He kept saying that Republicans shouldn't be fighting amongst themselves and criticizing each other, which is what is called Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment, that you should not speak badly about other Republicans. He seemed very intelligent, has a lot of great analogies and tells a lot of good stories and knows a lot of history that he kind of throws in. And that made him seem like a very controlled and efficient debater. And then he started coming to Iowa and traveling around and giving some talks. And most people that I've talked to, and I, of course, have gone to some of them, came away saying that they were very impressed, even if they were not Newt Gingrich supporters going into those meetings. And that built up his credibility. His poll numbers started rising. And then, in a spectacular way, he bypassed the other contenders, went from single-digit to what I said in the last poll, 37%, which is extraordinary. It's twice as much as Mitt Romney had. And Mitt Romney, who was the steady 25% favorite among Republican likely caucus goers, has now descended to about 18% or something like that. The third person who is doing quite well is Ron Paul. Ron Paul is probably sort of in second place now, has risen in the polls, has a very solid base of support, and is one of the top 3. So this is a miraculous rebirth of the new comeback kid, which is what Newt Gingrich says that he is. He came out with a new, I think it's a 10-point program of what he wants to do as president in terms of the economy and immigration and other things. Very succinct, and it's kind of like his contract with America. So Newt Gingrich is the hot story right now. The question is whether he can hold on to that front-runner status. And there is a lot of discussion about that. And that's because essentially when you are low in the poll numbers, people don't pay too much attention to you. But when you're at the top of the field, everyone starts asking questions. Can you survive criticism about your personal life? Newt Gingrich has had a couple of divorces and some affairs and so on, which he has acknowledged and said that he no longer, feels that way, that he's understood the error of his ways. Then there have been some other revelations that I think we've talked about, which have also gotten less attention, but are now getting a great deal of attention about what people think is his lobbying for Fannie Mae, the insurance, the mortgage guarantee company, and a very large pool of money that he received from companies in the medical field who subscribed to one of his think tanks, all of which has been called lobbying, which the Republicans really don't like very much, and which Newt Gingrich says was not, that it was just basically a think tank. So the question that we have, and we're going to be looking very carefully at this in the upcoming debates, there's one coming up in Des Moines and then a couple of others, is whether the other candidates for the Republican nomination are going to raise these issues in a very direct way. Not indirectly, but in a very direct way, because Iowa voters had either never knew about or had forgotten some of the more controversial aspects of Newt Gingrich. When he was Speaker of the House, he was considered a very divisive person, and in fact, even his own party kind of rebelled against him because he was such a control freak. And of course, he shut down the federal government, it is said, because on a flight on Air Force One with President Bill Clinton, Clinton had him sitting in the back of the plane and wouldn't bring him up to the front where the president sits, and that Newt Gingrich was personally so offended that he decided basically not to sign a budget extension. And therefore, essentially what happened was that the federal government had to shut down for a few days. Those are all things that could hurt him, and there's still several weeks left before the caucuses, so we're watching with a great deal of anxiety and anticipation to see whether he holds on to his lead position or whether that is diminished somewhat once presumably the other Republicans go after him in the debates. Very interesting scenario, and Newt Gingrich is an interesting personality. This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com.